Welcome back. It's the Kovacs Report, and we've got a new #1 from Image Comics. Yes, a mini-series called Everything, Dead and Dying by Tate Brombal of Batgirl fame and Jacob Phillips. Now, this almost slips under my radar. It almost did, only because I'm not a big fan of the Batgirl title at the moment. That's not to say it isn't very good. It just wasn't floating my boat. Maybe it's changed. I need to go back. But there was something about this cover and that title, and the fact it's got that little tiny onion logo on it, that I thought this could be good. And boy, oh boy, was it good. In fact, it's probably one of my books of the week. So I'm going to go through it page by page. There will be spoilers, of course. Like the video if you can, and hit subscribe. Just hit that button. I'd really, really appreciate it. So it's story time, basically. This man and his daughter are getting ready for bed, and she wants a story, of course. Now, there's some important phrases in this book because there's some repetition in this book for a reason. It says it always starts the same. So he starts telling this story to his young daughter, where we've got these, I guess, little flashbacks or moments where we see the shovel digging in the earth. And he explains that once upon a time, in a quiet little town, there lived a farmer, and he was a good farmer, and it's all that he knew. And that guy worked his land from sunrise to sunset every single day, tilling his fields, feeding his chickens, and collecting his harvest right on time. He was a good farmer after all, and his name was Jack. And she goes, "Daddy, that's your name." So it's established that this is a story about him. So it says life wasn't always like that. It wasn't always good because Jack found it hard to find friends. And what we find out is that Jack is actually gay. Okay, so some of his friends he had to keep secret, which made life very difficult for him. Now, he said Jack got used to, living alone until one day he built himself a house on a hill overlooking a town. Okay, and he built it with his own 2 hands. And just when Jack thought that life might be lonely forever, he met a prince named Luke, right, which is his husband now, okay? And she says, Papa. So, we learn that this is a little family in a very small village in America, and they've got an adopted daughter. It's very, very interesting. But they say this little town wasn't happy about that arrangement because they were obviously, bigoted, homophobic, small-minded townsfolk, basically. So one day they were actually allowed to get married because the law changed, and after that happened, they decided that something was missing and they needed a small child to raise. So they found a friend called Elizabeth, who they call the godmother, or fairy godmother, and they had a daughter through her, and that daughter was called Daisy. Now, while this is happening, you're getting these little flashes of digging, all right? Snap, 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 and it's supposed to imply that he's a farmer digging a hole, doing what he's supposed to be doing. And this is something that I just want to quickly just throw in here and break up what's going on in this book, is that the exposition of what's going on and what went on and what's about to go on is so well done here. He's done this sort of 9-panel Alan Moore Watchmen-esque layout. And it really, 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 really works. And then we get panels which look a bit odd, which look a bit different. Anyway, now, Jack apparently wasn't just a good farmer. He was a husband and father, and as that little town opened up to him, he became a friend, no longer in secret. So the town accepted him. They realized that we're just good people, and everything started to get really good. Now, Jack looked back on the long life he'd built. Every hardship, bruise, and teardrop was worth it for the life he could call his own. The end. See you in dreamland, Daddy. Of course, baby doll. See you in. And this is where you start thinking, well, hold on a minute. Something isn't quite right, because those panels where he's digging and looking at his hands look ominous to me. So something is hidden, and you see him over a grave. Dreamland. And it says it always starts the same every single night. And then I hear them coming like they always do, because it always ends the same every single night. And you see these sort of hands trying to grab him. And then he screams and he wakes up, and his little girls are sitting on top of him, and it's breakfast time, and they have their little morning routine. So come on, let's go downstairs. Don't forget Mr. Ducky. What does a duck say? Quack, quack, quack. Something smells good. Papa's making pancakes. They walk downstairs, and it is this idyllic, beautiful time. They're getting ready for breakfast. She wants extra maple syrup. It's the weekend, so she's going to be starting school on Monday, and then the door knocks right on time. And it's the postman. Postman is happy chappy. They have their little conversation because, they live in the same town. They're all friends now. And it's this little routine day in, day out. And it looks lovely, doesn't it? And then you get these flashes here where you see something maybe that he's seeing So what is happening, or what has happened? We see this kind of, I would say, zombified face, right? Oh, he says goodbye, and then he walks back in the house. And again, it says it always starts the same every single day. And we see this terrible scene here. It doesn't look good, but they're fine. But everything else looks bad. So it's almost like reality and the dream, you know, is merging. Or the reality of what he sees is merging. It's really, really interesting. They draw both the other characters much more colourful than him. He, throughout this, on my second read, I'd noticed he's very grey in all this, and everything else is colour. It's like he's not real or real, and everything else is the opposite. And it's really, really well done. It's very subtle. Anyway, when he was 5, his father found the highest hill in town and showed him the view, as if he had something to prove. Told me that the view was the entire fucking world, dirty mouth and everything. I believed him. Thought the earth was all forest and farmland, and this little town was the summer civilization. He says his mother took him to the big city, and it near gave him a panic attack. But my father wasn't lying, not really, not the cruel kind of lie anyway. No, to a man like him, what else was there? Just forests and farmlands. So this is his whole life. Basically, Dad's long dead now. Can't say I grieved him. The man disowned me as a son, if such a thing's even possible. So I built my house upon his view, made it mine. Then he left me his farm in his will on the other side of the world, so the other side of the town. So he drives through the town and everything looks, as you would expect, quite normal. And then we get these little flashes, these blood-stained, gruesome flashes for a second where everything looks normal. You know, Caverton looks like any other small little town, people going about their business. You know, it's idyllic. And then we get to this farm, which is kind of jarring. It is kind of jarring. You've got this giant wall with razor wire and sort of, you know, graffitied Caverton farm. And it's really, really odd. There's this disconnection you start feeling that something really is wrong. And he says, Dad's dead. I ain't. World goes on. Work does too. And he says hello to his little dog, and they get to work, as you would every single day. And then when you drive through the town, everything looks a little bit different. It looks a bit darker, a bit more grim, and you see these kind of, I guess, zombified residents sort of muttering in the dark. See you in dreamland. So there's this sort of Groundhog Day, this repetition that happens. It always starts the same. And then we start seeing things as they actually are. You know, we see their little hands sort of all like blood stained and zombified again. He lifts her up, but this time we see the reality of the situation. Like, you know, half her face is missing. She's not there. She is the undead. And that whole routine that we saw at the beginning plays out again, but in reality, right? It's come on, then burning daylight, never. And the little duck's there, and the little kid says in sort of zombie language, you know, quack, quack, quack. Everything is on repeat. And this is what we learn. We learn the truth of the matter is that the reality that we've just seen is a complete fiction. He's remembering how it was because that's his way of dealing with it and getting through the day. So we go down to the kitchen where the exact same scenario is played out to the T, to the letter. Okay, but we see what's really happening. We see him feeding them this sort of flesh, I guess. I don't know what type of flesh, but it doesn't look good. And when we find out something a little bit different, we go through the town as we did before, but we see it as it is. We see exactly as it is. But then we see the chicken acting differently, and that scares him. It scares him a lot. So he goes to see his friend, and we find out this young lady, Liz, who was the surrogate mother to their child. And he has this big, long conversation. They exchange how much they care about each other and everything else. You know, and explains about these chickens. They've never usually attacked each other. Something is changing in the town. He's worried about it. So we think, oh, great. At least he's got a friend there. At least it's not just him. But sure enough, as this long conversation goes on, we learn quite a lot of, you know, the past and, you know, his motivations for being here, wanting to protect the town, you know, wanting to make sure that, you know, it keeps on going, the people are cared for, maybe there's a way to reverse it, but then we find out, you know what, she's just one of the zombies too, and she's there in there. But again, this is all this repetitive Groundhog Day, the same thing happens, until one morning he gets up, and it's different. So something has changed. Daisy isn't there waking him up like she usually does. There's no quack, quack, quack to the duck. You know, downstairs is all a mess. You know, the postman turns up, but he's early. You know, he doesn't usually come at that time. And we find out that he's obviously a zombie too. But the difference is this time his head gets completely exploded by a gunshot. Okay. And then reality really drops in. And we turn to see that there looks like there's a hunting party coming. It says it always starts the same until it doesn't. Then what? And that is where the book ends. Wow. Now, this isn't a twist that, hasn't been done before, but this was done so well. I was on the edge of my seat every single page. This is so interesting. I absolutely love it. And I had to read it twice just to make sure I didn't miss anything. But this book really, really felt like a breath of fresh air in the whole world of zombies. Because once I realized it was zombies, I was like, okay, are we going to go down that road again? But this didn't. This really didn't. This is something new. This feels very fresh. And I cannot wait to see where it goes. It's only a mini-series, as far as I know, but hopefully it's going to be a good one. So this is an absolute recommend. Like I say, one of my books of the week. In fact, it's probably my indie book of the week. And I thoroughly recommend, if this is your type of thing, to jump on board. Again, I'm just going to play a little moment here of smoke, blowing some smoke, because Jacob Phillips' art in this is beautiful. It really, really fits the tone. And there's just so many sort of little color changes or little device that he does to emphasize things that are so subtle that unless you're really looking, you don't realize it. But already subconsciously, you have the. It's just, I just love it. I absolutely love this book. And I haven't loved a zombie book for a very, very long time. Anyway, I'm starting to trip over my words because his book has really got me over the moon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it there. So let me know your thoughts. Those are mine. Hopefully you've liked the video. Hopefully you subscribed if you haven't already. That would be amazing. So until next time, bring more comics and we'll see you soon.